Next is decision making theory. Some of the theories hypothesize that there are critical points in people's lives when choices are made that greatly influence their career development, such as educational choices, entry level job positions, changing jobs. Other theories concerned with ongoing choices or choices across the lifespan. The decision made or influenced by people's awareness of the choices that are available to him and his knowledge of how to evaluate them. Decision making process and theories. So, stages of decision making includes advertisements. In an important sense, management is synonymous with the decision making. About the stages in decision making, there are three criteria identified by Simon: intelligence, searching for problems and identifying and defining problems that demand action. More briefly, what is the problem? Advertisements, design, formulating alternative course of action and identifying their likely costs and consequences. More briefly, what are the alternatives? Next is choice, selecting a particular course of action from the various alternatives. More briefly, what alternative is best? Thus, we need to understand the following 3 points. The proportion of time devoted to each of these activities will vary from one situation to another, from one level of authority to another, and from one manager to another. Next, each stage is in itself a complex decision making process, as each problem generates sub-problems and requires application of all these 3 criteria. Next, the identification of stages does not guarantee any easy solution of managerial problems, but does assist the managers in some way or other. Types of decisions. If organizations are viewed as a hierarchy of decision making and decision makers, it implies that at different levels of the organization, management will be concerned with the different types of decision. An outline classification of decision making is given as comprehension. The decision making process is very complex. There is no simple analytical model upon which basic strategy choices are made, and the diagram shows that a large number of disciplines influence and interact on strategic decision making in organizations. Decision making process. From company to company and within the same company, the decision process is constantly changing. Furthermore, major strategic decisions tend to be, in most cases, unique to each organization. Theories of decision making. The theories of decision making in a broad classification are of 2 types. One is rational or normative, and the other one is behavioral. So, rational or normative and behavioral. Their characteristics and general theme are presented on the rationality approach to decision making. Simon observes in terms of what objectives and whose values shall rationality be judged. On the basis of this question, he has identified 4 types of rationality in decision making. One is objectively rational, if it maximizes given values in given situation. Next is subjectively rational, if it maximizes attainment of given values in the context of bounded or limited knowledge of the decision maker. Next is organizationally rational, if it is oriented to the attainment of organizational goals or objectives. 7 objectives discussed hereafter for planning. Next is personally rational, if it is oriented to an individual's goal. It is interesting to note that Syed and March also emphasize the ongoing political process involved in the reconciliation of such goals. They say organizations do not have objectives, only people have objectives. Thus, organizational objectives are the end product of a complex and continuous interaction between individuals and groups within and outside the organization. Organization of decision making. In the organization of decision making, there are basically 2 crucial schemes. One is centralization and decentralization, other one is departmentalization. Centralization and decentralization possibly was modern in the concept. According to Fayol, everything which goes to increase the importance of the subordinate's role in decentralization, and everything which goes to reduce it is centralization. The question of centralization or decentralization is a simple question of proportion, and it is a matter of finding the optimum degree of the particular concern. There are a range of factors that affect the optimum proportion. Of them, 3 major factors are the size of the organization. So the larger the organization, the more difficult it is to exercise detailed control from the center. Next is the degree of diversity in the activities being controlled. It is easier to centralize the control of similar activities than dissimilar ones. And the last one, the quality of superiors and subordinates. The centralization presupposes competent superiors and decentralization competent subordinates. The history of the enterprise and the philosophy of management are also other criteria. The positive features of decentralization are it reduces the load on top management and it encourages initiative and drive of middle and junior management. It enables quick decisions and it assists in the appraisal of managerial performance. The negative features of decentralization are closer coordination and control by top management are rendered difficult, and some duplication of effort and activities takes place. Uniform application of policies and standards is difficult at times, and centralization and decentralization are thus complex issues. Certain types of decisions require centralization and certain types of decision requires decentralization. Again, certain departments may be centralized and others decentralized, and so we find that many US companies which went multinational adopted divisional structure and attempted to combine centralized and control with decentralized operations. Departmentation is this issue should be discussed along with the matrix structure of an organization. There are many ways in which the decision makers can be departmentalized, but the main approach could be summarized in a diagram. It combines the advantage and disadvantages of both functional and product organizations, and the optimum balance between them would yield result in the strategic choices and applications. So, two basic points emerge therefrom: the interrelationship between organizational charges over certain centralization and decentralization, and the relevance of a management dictum that structure follows strategy. One important caution to a practicing manager is that he should be a conflict resolver and a joint delegator in his total task, and should see to the practical realities of organizational decision making without having a massive structural upheaval. Next is cognitive theories. Cognitive theories suggest way to help clients build or refine a hierarchy of thinking skills and decision making skills that influence career development. The theory is built around how individuals process, integrate and react to information. Next is the way in which individuals process information are determined by their cognitive structure. So, cognitive theories of human behavior and decision making models became popular in the early 70s and 80s as a response to behaviorism. The cognitive theories relevant to gambling focus on cognitive distortions related to gambling. The psychological literature supports that human beings maintain several thought distortions, especially about gambling. Illusions of control refer to a belief that one has a greater amount of control on the gambling outcome than would be expected. Early experimental work found that people would behave differently if given the appearance that they could control the outcome. For example, Langer demonstrated that people who picked the number of lottery ticket placed higher monetary value on that ticket than people whose tickets had already been randomly chosen for them, despite the fact that the outcome would be completely determined by chance and the expected value of both tickets is therefore identical. A second type of cognitive distortion relevant to gambling situation is commonly known as attribution bias. Wagner demonstrated that people who won on a series of hands of blackjack would attribute their wins to their skill as compared to those who lost several hands, who would not make a personal skill attribution. There has been some support for the contention that disordered gamblers have significantly more cognitive distortions or qualitatively differ in types of distortions made compared to non-disordered gamblers. However, other studies have not found support for differences in the frequency of erroneous statements by disordered or non-disordered gamblers. Overall, cognitive distortions appear to be common regardless of gambling severity. Cognitive theory suggests that once an individual has experienced the negative thinking associated with anxiety and depression, there is an increased risk that he or she will develop maladaptive cognitive schema, which with repetition can become entrenched. For many clients, a small amount of nervousness or disappointed expectations can trigger a rush of negative cognitions.